On the debate tonight, Congress rolls out their set of promises before the elections, hoping to cash in on the BJP's unemployment headache. The Congress Manifesto comes up with a 15-point plan to generate employment.
22 लाख सरकारी रोजगार खाली पड़े हैं, उनको कांग्रेस पार्टी मार्च 2020 तक भर के दे देगी। 10 लाख युवाओं को ग्राम पंचायतों में रोजगार दिया जा सकता है। उन 10 लाख युवाओं को कांग्रेस पार्टी ग्राम पंचायतों में रोजगार दे देगी।
Under what it terms GST 2.0, the Congress party has also proposed a simpler tax system which will bring real estate, petroleum products, tobacco and liquor under GST.
गब्बर सिंह टैक्स को हम जीएसटी में बदलेंगे। 5 अलग-अलग टैक्स हैं, अलग-अलग फॉर्म भरने पड़ते हैं, रिश्वत देनी पड़ती है। हम एक सिंपल टैक्स देंगे, कम से कम टैक्स होगा, सरल सिंपल टैक्स होगा। ये काम कांग्रेस पार्टी ने मैनिफेस्टो में लिखा है, ये भी हम डिलीवर करके दे देंगे।
Finance Minister Arun Jaitley was quick to hit out, calling the Congress Sankalp Patra impractical.
Out of ignorance, he makes unimplementable and dangerous promises. I am sure the country will not be in a mood to oblige him.
Mirror now asks, can Congress end the job crisis? Are the Congress's promises practical? Let's debate.
Well, are the promises practical, or, as the finance minister has pointed out, are they non-implementable and dangerous for the country? And we're focusing right now on the promises made for jobs, for taxation, for the Nyay scheme, and of course, change in the scope of the Supreme Court. On the show with me, Nalin Mehta, senior journalist, Professor Arun Kumar, Chair Professor at the Indian Institute of Social Sciences. He's an economist. Mohan Guruswamy, senior economist, joins us as well. Yogendra Yadav, National President of Swaraj India, will join us through the course of this conversation. Shama Mohammed for the Congress, Vinay Tibari, consulting editor for the Times Network. I welcome all of you to this conversation. Thank you for your time. A quick round of opening statements for our panelists as to whether or not they believe this is practical and implementable, or do they agree with Mr. Jaitley on the fact that this is potentially dangerous? First question to you, Vinay. What is your appraisal of the manifesto so far?
Well, I mean, some of the schemes that they have mentioned, of course, are implementable, specific to, you know, having a separate budget for farmers. Well, that is possible to do without any cost implication. To change the liability from criminal to civil in cases of loan defaults for farmers, you don't really need money for that. You just need an amendment of the law.
In fact, someone was just telling us that a lot of times when farmers borrow to buy a tractor, they have to hand over, like most of us do, signed checks, blank checks beforehand. Right. And when that check bounces, they wind up going to jail. Absolutely. And that's tremendously embarrassing as well.
It is, and it's farmers. Also an issue that actually is quite disconcerting in small villages in India, for sure. It's an issue that resonates. Now, these two provisions don't require financial allocations, and hence are practically possible to implement. But I'm afraid a lot of the other things that they have been promised, and I guess Manifesto is the season where you can, it's an open season for making all kinds of tall promises. Yes. I mean, you can say anything you want to in a manifesto. I don't want to use the word 15 lakh because that figure is disputed, but well, the BJP's manifesto in 2014 talked about black money coming back to India. It hasn't.
Yes.
So manifestos are open season, and I guess Mr. Rahul Gandhi's manifesto also has lots of promises for which there is no real obvious answer on where the money is going to come from. And that's the tougher bit.
So the BJP's manifesto actually talked about 1 crore jobs. It talked about the 15 lakhs, or whatever amount of money would be brought back to India from, you know, Swiss bank accounts specifically. And it talked about beating corruption, none of which has actually played out. So we have to remind our viewers that it costs nothing to print it out in a manifesto. This is just you know, perhaps this is an intention in the very least. It costs nothing to print it. It's about the political will to actually carry it out.
It's intention, and I also suspect that manifesto exercises have become headline grabbing exercises. You tend to write things because they grab headlines. A lot of things, for instance, in the manifesto are actually contradictory in nature. Each party, I'm not saying only Congress, I think even Congress's manifesto also has contradictory provisions in the same manifesto that they have. You can't have, for instance, I'll give you a small specific example. if the party promises 22 lakh jobs will be filled up, that's bloating your bureaucracy further. The really need of the hour actually is to reduce the bureaucracy, not increase it.
Yes,
that's
and I just point out that I asked that question of Mr. Chidambaram, and his response to that was that these are already sanctioned jobs. They're already budgeted for, they're sanctioned, they're planned for, they're just not filled. What we will do is make sure that they're filled. So that's his justification for it. But Nalin Mehta is with us as well. Nalin, when you looked at the manifesto, what's your first impression of it, with the disclaimer to our audience that these are just promises for now? Were you impressed, or do you agree with Mr. Jaitley tonight?
Well, I think I agree with what Vinay was saying, that the manifesto promises a lot of things from the Congress. There's an amalgamation of essentially what Rahul Gandhi has been saying in all his meetings and his public utterances in the last month or 2 months. I don't think I think political parties do promise the moon in manifestos. I'm not sure how seriously a lot of voters take manifestos per se, but there is a shift in this manifesto, Faye, which is that the Congress is not just talking about its usual rights-based agenda. I think what I saw in this manifesto is also reaching out significantly to industry, and in terms of health, for example, it is talking of a shift from an insurance-based kind of approach that we've had so far to a much more universal health coverage kind of approach. Now, is the question, is the promise of 72,000 rupees in everybody's bank account feasible or not? I think there are serious concerns on issues around the fiscal deficit with that. Even Raghuram Rajan has been quoted as saying in the last couple of weeks that it is feasible, but it's going to be very difficult. It is feasible if you start putting together a lot of other subsidies, moving them aside and putting them into one box, and that will require a lot of jugglery in the current scheme of things without making clear, hard choices on what subsidies you will withdraw and what you will put into a scheme like this. It's going to be a difficult ask.
Right. Professor Kumar, do you believe that the announcements made on health, industry and education are implementable, and are they reasonable?
So, Faye, as you rightly said, these are intentions, and very good intentions. But one thing I think that's defining the manifesto is that it's more inclusive than what we have seen earlier, So in a sense, the basic manifesto that has been coming earlier, from Congress was not as inclusive as this one is, by bringing together a lot of marginalized sections and making specific provisions for these marginalized sections, But I think the problem that will come is that when you give so much to so many different sections, you need to raise resources as well. And that's where the fiscal part of the manifesto, where we talk about the GST2 and where we talk about the direct tax code, these are probably very important, But one thing that is missing there is how are you going to raise the extra resources? If you're going to increase 2% of GDP on education from roughly a little below 4% to 6%, on health from 1% to 3% roughly, and on the Nyay scheme at least 2% of GDP.
Yes.
So what you're talking about, if you count everything together, including the extra expenditure on bureaucracy, etc., you're talking about 7 to 8% of GDP extra expenditure over and above what is planned for now. Now, any good accounting process should show where those resources are going to come from, So, the question of wealth taxation, estate duty, etc., should have been mentioned there, but it does not find mention. So, in that sense, when we say, will promises be fulfilled, what we have to ask is, will the government that comes, if Congress comes to power, would it be accountable to the people? And this is where, by and large, what we've seen is that governments, once they come to power, parties, when they come to power in government, they don't necessarily fulfill the promises. So it's not just this NDA government which has not fulfilled many of the promises, as was pointed out. But I remember even the Congress party, when the 1991 election took place, had promised that we'll roll back prices within 150 days to what Rajiv Gandhi's time prices in 1989 were. But after coming to power, Mr. Manmohan Singh, who was then the finance minister, said this is not possible. Similarly, during the Janta regime, Morarji Bhai, the Prime Minister, said that was the party's manifesto, this is the government's program. So in other words, the government is not responsible for fulfilling the party's program. So these kind of things we have seen in the past. And that's where I would have been happier to see, I like many of the things that I mentioned, but I'd been happier to see if in the fiscal part it had been said, how are all these desirable things going to be financed, whether it would be possible to do all this within one budget, or within 5 years, or within 10 years, what would be the time scale on which these things would be implemented. So there are many good things, but I think it falls short in terms of, the accountability part of, whether these things would be fulfilled.
Yes, Shama Mohammed, these are very good questions. If we add up what the changes in GST are going to cost us, which is bringing petrol and alcohol under GST, the farm loan waiver that's been mentioned but with very little clarity, the Nyay scheme that we understand will cost less than 1% of GDP in the first year, 2% in the second year, an increased spend in health, increased spend in education, but no clarity of where this money is going to come from. Is there understanding right now of what all of this is going to collectively cost us and where the money is going to come from?
Faye, if today Mr. Narendra Modi had gotten Nyaya scheme, all the journalists, all the television channels will say, Chanakya Niti, wow, look what Narendra Modi has got for the poor.
Shama Mohammed,
because the Congress
I've asked you a question. If you're willing to answer that question, I'm fine with it. But I'm not going to be open to you standing here and telling us that we don't question the government of the day. You are well aware of the fact that we have questioned the government of the day in and day out for the last 2 years of the existence of this channel. We're questioning you today. Do you have an answer for the question that has been asked?
Now, I did not say it is you, Faye. I was just talking in general about, and you have to let me speak. You don't have to get hyperactive. If you want to get hyperactive, I can leave. But let me answer.
I will take it personally if you are on my show questioning the integrity of the journalists. There are 3 journalists on this channel right now, and all of whom have questioned the government for the last 2 years. Do you have an answer to the question I have asked you, Shama Mohammed?
There are many who don't question.
Then please ask them on their shows.
If you do not want to listen to me, I can leave. You don't have to be all this, you don't have to be rude to me. I am going to answer the question. I'm coming to it. But if you want to get up every time and be rude to me when I come to your show, then you don't have to invite me. Because I've noticed one thing, every time I come onto your show, unlike other people, you start becoming rude to me. I'm answering your question. I didn't say anything. I have to say what I want to say, and I never pointed out it's you. There are many journalists out there who keep saying in many other channels that this is Chanakya Niti by Narendra Modi.
Do you want to answer the question I have asked you?
And I never said that it is Faye. So I'm going to get to the point. Now, when we did Manrega, we had the funds. People were at that point asking, where would you get the money? We waived off in 2008 farm loans worth 70,000 crores. That time they asked us, where do you get the money? We had the money. In 2012, we got in the Food Security Act. At that point, they asked, where are you going to get the money? We did it. So Congress party is a party. When we say something, we promise something, we will do it. And we'll find the money. And we have senior economists. We have Mr. P. Chidambaram, who's got out many budgets, who says, that there are funds for Nyaya. So, and we are not going to remove our Manrega. We will have the other schemes as it is. And when we say something like this, and he also mentioned, Mr. P. Chidambaram, there will be other economists from around the world working with us. So when we say something like this, we have looked at it. We have worked for the past 4-5 months or a year on this, and we have got the budget for it. And once we come to, when we form the government, the clarity of it is exactly going to be out there. But yes, when we have certain things, we have said certain things, we have always done it. And it's told that it will be 5,000 crore families. There will be 1%, from the first year, it will be 1% of the GDP. The second year, it will be 2% of the GDP. And it's clearly said out there, it will be 6,000 rupees per month. It will be 72,000 per year. So there is clarity on that. And of course, the funds will be there. We are clear on that we will do something like this. And we had lifted from 2004 to 2014, 145 million people out of poverty. And this is not what the Congress party said. This is what Oxfam said. And the independent bodies around the world has said about the Congress party and the UPA government, what they have done. So we have always stood for the welfare of the poor, and we will stand. And also, Along with that, we are creating jobs. And you've seen the manifesto, I have it right in front of me, how we're going to create jobs. So it's just not, on one side, there is the poorest of poor out there. We need to uplift them. And on the other side, we need to give jobs, because in the last 4-5 years, we have lost 4 crore jobs in this country. We've lost due to demonetization and various investments being taken out of this country. Construction is almost down. We have no exports. Our exports have come down. When we left, the exports were at $350 billion. Last year, the exports were at $160 billion. So that is, manufacturing sector is at the lowest of low. MSMEs are also almost dead after demonetization. We're going to bring all those back in.
Okay. So I'm just going to bring in rebuttals on a couple of these points. Mohan Guruswamy, senior economist, was also advisor to the finance minister at one point. Mr. Guruswamy, are you convinced with the argument that the Congress party has always fulfilled its promises and they will find the money? Is that convincing to you?
Well, that is certainly not convincing. But, you know, I've taken part in about the writing of about a half a dozen manifestos. And manifestos really collective efforts involving several people, and everybody gives a little input. And so, you just keep adding, saying that, this is fine, let's have this, let's have this. Now, look at how the BJP manifesto in 2014 was. 100 new cities of accommodating 1 million to 2 million people. High-speed railway network connecting the whole country. When I totaled it up at that stage, it was about $1 trillion. Clearly, there were no ways and means planned for it. So typically, these people sit without planning the ways and the means for it. Where are you going to get the money, and how are you going to collect the money, how are you going to spend it? Now, they are all talking about objectives. These are all laudable objectives. I think the Nyaya scheme is laudable. The increase in education budget is also laudable. Increase in health budgets is also laudable. All these are highly laudable. And some of them are fairly doable. Like, for instance, Nyaya is doable. I've been saying from day one that, something which costs about 1.3% of GDP is doable in the 5th year, and it will be done. I have no doubt it will be done. It might have leakages, it might have all kinds of other things. But you can't have endless giveaways. You can't keep on saying that, banks will keep giving farmers money and farmers don't have to repay it. Money lenders give more money than banks these days. And so this guarantee of loan waiver goes only to the large and medium farmer. The small farmer goes to the money lender. And he doesn't get any waiver. So, the problem is you've got to address those issues. So, a part of this is populist, part of this is saying that we're giving you minimum support prices, we're giving you this, all that. All that is fine. But the market will dictate all these things. And you can't keep giving away the bank's money. It's not your money. The government has to pay for it. Where is the government going to get? So you have to talk about ways and means. Who are you going to tax? They don't want to talk about these things. Because at this moment, they're all placating all sections. They're placating the CII, they're placating the Billionaires Boys Club, everybody. And the lowest to the low, they want whose votes they want. So, I think you should give them with a pinch of salt and say, because the tradition of writing a detailed plan, saying that where are you going to get the money and how much you would, is not shared in this country. When I remember when after the Vajpayee government came, the question was asked, what about the manifesto? So I had to write a speech at that stage where I said that we see government as a continuum. That, what Manmohan Singh left behind, we will continue with that. We don't see it as, spasmodic jerks, that we suddenly turn direction, do all kinds of things. So even this new Congress government, if it comes, or whoever comes, they will be government in continuum. Narendra Modi discovered that. He couldn't do anything. He said, Manmohan Singh said he'll reform the bureaucracy. Modi said he'll reform the bureaucracy. They didn't do anything. Bureaucracy today is that you're short of bureaucracy by 30%. But you don't have the money because you've got such a high-cost bureaucracy, highest salaries in the country, that you can't afford anymore.
Yes.
So, if you fill up vacancies in the center, you'll have to fill up vacancies down the line. You don't have the money for it.
Yes,
you
that's
add up
the
all that,
fundamental question of where
and
the
so
money
where
is
is
going
the
to
money
come
going to
from.
come
And
from?
Mr. Guruswamy is right. There's been no clarity because you don't want to upset the billionaires club by talking about tax on rich. You don't want to upset the middle class by talking about increased taxes on the middle class. So where is the tax going to, where's the money going to come from? But Vinay, I want to come back to you about, and this has come up now not once, but 3 different members of the Congress party. But you didn't question the BJP at that time. Why are you asking these questions now? As journalists, it is our job to ask questions, and we have to ask questions of everyone. This is not a valid answer for anything we're asking today.
No, absolutely not. I mean, it's look, the only point I can make in response to Shama Mohammad's getting very agitated is this. Well, I mean, I don't want to sound condescending, but look, we've been in this profession longer than she's been in politics, and I can tell you, we've spent our lifetime asking questions to prime ministers, to governments. We've seen many, many prime ministers. And I think if Congress really wants to stay different as a party, they need to stop getting agitated when a question is put to them. BJP gets irritated all the time because they're not used to being questioned. But when we have, every time on our show, they have gotten irritated. And I think the Congress shouldn't get irritated because it's healthy in a democracy to be asking questions. The trouble is, when there is a culture of everything becoming very bombastic, you know, budget, I mean, a manifesto has unfortunately become a ritualistic exercise. And the biggest problem is that nobody either goes out to vote with the manifesto in mind, nor do we think of the manifesto when we are trying to re-elect or throw out a government. In 2009, Manmohan Singh was not re-elected because they fulfilled the manifesto promises. In 2014, Manmohan Singh wasn't voted out because he did not fulfill manifesto. They got voted in or out for completely different reasons. And the parties have realized that this is ritualistic. So it's all become sloganeering. You can put any slogan you want to in that budget with no clarity and no answer on where it's going to happen. I'll give you a small example. One of the points in today's manifesto is about Mr. Gandhi making a lot of virtue and hue cry about, for 3 years, you don't need permissions to start any business.
Yes.
There cannot be anything more absurd than that, and I'll tell you why. Even if you have to open a restaurant in this country, you need 21 licenses from the municipal corporation to the health department to the police. There is no concept of no permission in this country. It doesn't exist. There is no concept of zero permission. So to say that you don't need permissions is wrong. People get harassed by BMC in Bombay, by MCD in Delhi, by the Chennai Municipal Corporation in Chennai. There are hundreds of levels of bureaucracy which the central government doesn't control at all. So you can't always say that, oh, tomorrow morning there'll be no permission required, you can do what you want to.
Yes.
Similarly, they promised they'll repeal sedition, for instance, right? Their own state government has booked people under the NSA for cow slaughter or for cow smuggling. You need to walk the talk, and there are contradictions inherent in manifestos depending on which side of the divide you're sitting.
Right, and also they've talked about bringing in the women's reservation bill. As of now, from the number of candidates we have seen, that the ticket tally to women is about 11 or 12%. It's nowhere near the 30% that we would have if we did have women's reservation bill. So if you're going to make that promise, you should actually play it out. I saw Nalin's hand go up. Nalin Mehta, senior journalist.
These questions?
Just 1 second, Shama.
Faye, can I come in and answer?
I will give you an opportunity. Nalin Mehta first, please. Nalin, go ahead.
No, I was just saying, Faye, I was just saying that on the question of women, for example, I'm just actually comparing the Congress 2014 manifesto and the 2019 manifesto. On women, for example, his position was for 33% reservation earlier. Now it's moved to 33% reservation in all central government jobs. And if you compare the two manifestos, I think the stream of reasoning is very similar on many issues. But this one is a much better drafted manifesto. It's much more specific. For example, on jobs, on a number of on employment, for example. In new businesses, it earlier said we'll make it easier to start new businesses and encourage corporate social responsibility. This time it's saying new businesses won't need permissions for 3 years, especially for MSMEs. The point I'm trying to make is that this is a much more thought out and more considered document than earlier. But what's even more significant than that, I mean, you can argue about whether they have money to implement this or not, whether it's all a pipe dream. Manifestos at the end of the day are political statements about a party's positioning. And I think the Congress in this manifesto has been less reactive than earlier. It is trying to create a counter narrative. in a post-Balakot era to talk about reviewing AFSPA, to talk about a new dialogue, unconditional dialogue on Kashmir, to talk about removing sedition laws. All of these, by saying all of these, I think it's the manifesto, if you read the fine print, starts with a very clear positioning of the Congress's idea of a pluralistic India versus very clearly what it talks about the RSS, the ideological family of the RSS and the Prime Minister, and then goes into very specifics. But I think it's not, this is not just a usual document. The Congress, I think, is trying to create a counter narrative, and to that extent, this is a break from at least the last couple of manifestos we've seen. This is also very different from the Congress manifestos in recent state assembly elections, for example, in Madhya Pradesh, where the Congress was trying to be more Hindu than the BJP, if you like, at least as far as manifesto was concerned. So this is a different kind of manifesto, I would think.
Shama Mohammed, you wanted to respond? Go ahead, please.
Yeah, I wanted to respond to the gentleman who spoke before Mr. Nalin. Is not that I'm always ready to answer any questions. I don't get agitated. I started my sentence and then Faye interrupted and say, answer my question. Nobody can tell, you can't just tell a panelist, answer my question. Yes, I'm getting to that question and I will answer that. But before that, I was generally, and not pointing fingers at Faye, because I know she always questions, I've seen that. I was generally telling about how in certain channels, how they become one-sided after 2014. They do not question the present government, they do not question the Prime Minister, and they say whatever the Prime Minister does is Chanakya Niti. So I was putting in that context and not to personally to Faye. So I am not an agitated person, but if a needle is put into me, I respond. That is one. Number two, you talked about the women's reservation. Yes, the party president wants 33% reservation, but you have to understand that we are not a party like TMC or BJD, which TMC is mainly in West Bengal and BJD is in Odisha. We are all over the country. So if we have to also, there is a PCC there, they have certain things to it. They might want more men sometimes. So in order to get everybody into the same picture, it is better to go and have that amendment done in the Lok Sabha much easier. Now, I come from a state like Kerala where there are more women to men. But I see most of the time more men in politics, and I question that too. And I want that a change to come about there. But that is because there is a part of patriarchy happening in that part of Kerala, where there is in politics, what I see is patriarchy. And that has to change. And if this bill gets passed, and Mr. Gandhi even went and said that, he wants even 33% reservation in government jobs for women. So he is very, very clear about it. And once we come to power, this is going to definitely get through this 33% reservations in Assembly and Lok Sabha, because we are dismal when compared to the world. We have just 11.5% compared to the world where, they are much higher, about 20% representation of women in politics, especially in the Lok Sabha and I'm sorry, in the assemblies and in the Lok Sabha. So that definitely will change. And about the other things, in terms of like the Mr. Nalin mentioned, there is 6% going to go for education. We're going to put 3% in healthcare. We are going to get in more jobs. So this manifesto, definitely there is a lot of clarity in this manifesto. And we have also said that the GST is going to be there in petrol, in diesel and petrol, there will be taxation. In you will have also alcohol will be taxed, tobacco is going to be taxed. So there are changes which have come about. We are committed to all this. And we have also said that...
One second, on that point.
They already are taxed.
On that point, in fact, this is something we've talked about a lot, and I see Professor Kumar putting his hand up. It says that we will bring petrol and alcohol and cigarettes under GST, and then it says GST will have only a single slab of tax. So that would effectively mean that the price of petrol and the price of cigarettes would crash, by nearly half of what it is, because a lot of what it is tax.
No. And the price of booze.
So I'm going to make... Yeah, can I...
One second. I just want Professor Kumar's response on this, and then I come back to you, Shama Mohammed. Professor Kumar, please.
Can I clarify that? What he means by one slab is generally you will have one slab, but there will be few things here and there which will be different. But it is not going to be like what it is right now. You have a 28%, then you have something at 40, then you have something at 18, then you have something at 15, then you have something at 2, then you have something at 8. That
so
is
what
not
is the
GST.
significance of
So
bringing
that
petrol
look
and
at the
diesel
larger
under
picture. The
GST
larger
if you're
picture
still
says
going
that
to
most of the
have
things-
special tax on it?
No, we are not going to have special tax on it.
Faye,
There might be,
the
what I'm trying to
point
say,
about
generally
GST
there will
is-
be one tax, but there will be few things which will be higher.
Okay, all right.
Can I?
No, one second. Professor
There
Kumar,
will
go
be
ahead.
certain things which
Oh, yeah, Professor Kumar, go ahead, please.
I think, yeah. So the point about keeping petroleum out and liquor for human consumption out was because the states were worried that they will not collect enough taxes and they could collect enough taxes from these, and that's why they were kept out. Now you'll have to convince the states, because it'll be through the GST Council, that you'll collect enough taxes so that they don't lose the revenues. Their deficits are already quite high, and if you take them out, so you have to show how you'll plan it. You have to transfer more resources to them from somewhere else. So unless GST begins to collect a lot more taxes, you will not be able to make this change. The states will protest if they begin to lose taxes. So I don't think it's going to be that easy to do that change within 2 years, because at the moment GST is not collecting as much taxes as it was supposed to collect, and therefore I don't think this change is going to be easy. But I want to make a larger point, and the larger point is what I said earlier. This manifesto is more inclusive than many other manifestos that you've seen, where the state will take responsibility for the marginalized sections. This is a change from the 1991 policies, where the state was taking less and less responsibility for the marginalized sections. So now large number of sections who are marginalized are going to receive something from the state. So this is, in a sense, going back to the Nehruvian policies that used to exist before 1991. And that, I think, is a big break that is taking place. But to finance that, you may have certain problems, because how would you tax to be able to do these things? So in a sense, if you want to make a consistent whole,
Yes.
you need to show the resource base, whether you'll tax wealth tax, whether you'll tax the other estate duty, etc. And another point is, if you're going to give more to the poor and state is going to take wider responsibility, you'll need a much larger bureaucracy. Because
Yes.
at the moment, our bureaucracy is very small. For 1 lakh of population, the number of police, the number of judges, the number of bureaucrats is very less compared to most other countries in the world. So therefore, the expenditure on bureaucracy will have to rise if you are going to take care of the
30%
large
short.
number of schemes that you have in mind. So in a sense, this is where, there are good things, but you need to put together the whole thing in a holistic perspective. And also it's very important to say whether you achieve these policies in 2 years or 5 years or 10 years, because everything cannot be achieved all at once. So this time gap also is very important. How you'll structure these things so that you can achieve more employment and more other, benefits to the farmers, etc.
Well, I do want to put out this piece of research for everyone who's asking about, farm loan waivers and how, if we forgive the farm loan waivers, and farmers are going to continue to borrow and not pay back. On latest count, agricultural NPAs, which are loans that have been borrowed and not paid back, were 87,900 crore rupees, and in comparison, the top 12 corporate NPAs in India are 4 times as much, which means that corporate India has borrowed and not paid back far more than our farmers could have ever. So when corporate India is getting massive restructures all the time, and by a restructure we mean what happened with Jet Airways, where Jet was not able to pay back, and the government of India then decided that we will give them even more money to keep them from going bust. So when we're doing that, why can't we also make sure that we're keeping our farmers looked after? Mr. Guruswamy, do you have a point or a response to whether or not we should consider a farm loan waiver, or a complete or a partial farm loan waiver across the country at this point?
Well, last year, all the states together gave about 140,000 crores as farm loan waivers. The state governments said that they will make good, and at some places, the central government said they'll make good. So that is actually an NPA. You're making good. So, I don't think these kind of comparisons are going to work. Thing is, a credit system has to function. Credit system to function means you've got to pay your loans back. It's simple as that. if you breach that, and Raghuram Rajan and a lot of people have been talking about this, if you breach that covenant, then you get into this mode into riding a tiger from which you can't dismount, which is where we are stuck. So every government now is a tradition to announce a farm loan waiver. So you can't keep doing this, you know. The point is that you need to get a consensus across the line to say, how are we going to address these issues of, you know, getting NPAs back?
Yes.
NPAs are, you know, there are now these mudras have become NPAs.
Yes.
How are you going to collect that from? And the average mudra loan is about 28,000 rupees. Where are you going to get that money from? So, you know, I think, you know, we need to get a sense of responsibility in these political parties, get them to think things through. Right now, it's all, you know, a competitive sloganeering, you know. And I think the Congress, like Arun said, Congress manifesto points to a direction which is quite laudable, it's quite good. But I think they needed to do more homework because it was sudden switch direction after 1996 maybe, and something which needed to be done. You can't have these kind of disparities between regions, income inequality, and continue with it, because that will lead to social breakdown.
Absolutely.
And we're heading towards that.
Yes, a couple of questions that have come in from our viewers.
It's a reversal of direction, which is very good.
Yes, the direction is good, but the details perhaps lacking. Vidyahar says, does the Election Commission have any prerogative to question political parties about impractical poll promises? Absolutely not. In fact, the Election Commission already has enough on its plate. It ought to be questioning people about. Vinay?
No, of course not. I mean, I guess this is, I mean, actually that's for us, the electorate, to actually be more mindful of. I think people need to start reading manifestos. They need to start understanding what it means and perhaps questioning the government going forward. I mean, I think it's more on us than on the EC.
Yogendra Yadav joins us right now, National President of Swaraj India. Mr. Yadav, good evening. Thank you for joining us. Your review of the Congress manifesto, just to bring you up to speed of the conversation that's happened so far. There have been questions about the details of where the money is going to come from that are missing. Will it be taxes? Will it be tax of rich, tax of middle class? If we're, you know, rationalizing GST, then it won't be an increased GST collection. So where will the money come from for an increased education, health, Nyay scheme, and a couple of other promises that the Congress has made? But from your point of view, are you impressed with the manifesto?
Faye, these are absolutely valid questions. We must be asking these questions. This country has seen one Jumla Sarkar for 5 years because when they made all these grand promises, no one interrogated them. And the last thing that this country needs is another Jumla Sarkar, that they promise someone something that is not interrogated. So I think you and other colleagues in the media, when they pin Congress down, when they interrogate, they are doing what the media ought to be doing. And my own sense is that Congress is not fully forthcoming on this, especially on the issues of revenue. The simple fact is that if you promise a Nyay scheme, if you promise 6% GDP on education, 3% on health, if you promise that no other subsidies will be withdrawn, then obviously you need to generate resources from somewhere. I would have wanted any party to be more candid and say, all right, this is how we would generate it. But I guess in our country, we've not reached a point where you can be so honest in an election thing. Now, I look at this document in two ways. One as a policy document, the other as a political document. As a policy document, I must say it's a serious document. It's not a Jumla document, for at least to begin with. And the reason why I would welcome this document is not because I agree with it. There are lots and lots of questions I have, lots of disagreements I have. But this allows me to raise the right questions. I may disagree with Nyay. I think there are design issues with Nyay. But it reminds me that there are very poor people in this country who need to be addressed, that they need a stimulus, not just the industrialist. On the farmers issue, not all the demands farmers organizations have made have been met here. So I have a quarrel. I would raise the question. But at least farmers' question is right in the focus. On employment, when Rahul Gandhi says we will get 20 lakh jobs from the governments all over the country, I would like him to begin with his own governments to do that. But at least the issue of jobs is at the center. RTE is recognized as an issue. That we need second ASHA worker is an issue. That we need health is an issue. So I like that. As a political document, however, I'm not entirely sure if this document is the kind of document we needed at this stage of the election to shift the narrative. And I don't know if any document could have done the trick. The problem is it's only 10 days to the first round of polling. Congress's ability and capacity to amplify and communicate is very poor. Mr. Modi can sell things which don't exist in his shop. Congress cannot sell things which are lying there on the counter. And three, Congress, like Mr. Modi, suffers from a credibility problem. When Congress says, we have done it, we will do it again, there are many in this country who feel a shiver down their spine. Congress will do it again. So while Congress wants to give this country a break from Mr. Modi's last 5 years, Congress doesn't promise us a break from the kind of Congress this country had seen 5 years ago. That is what may have turned the table, but we don't yet know. But at least I would say, all right, we've begun discussing the right issues.
Mr. Yadav, before I move on to the rest of the panel, quick question to you. You're a sophologist, you've studied elections for a very, very long time. When you consider the power of the Congress party now with this manifesto and everything else that has been said, the alliances that have and have not worked out, do you believe they're well placed, given that there is only 10 days to go before the first round?
Faye, I used to do it in my previous birth. And these days I wonder why people do this election forecast and why does anyone take them seriously? So honestly, no election forecast. But I would simply say this much, that if this election comes back to its fundamentals, then BJP is on a very, very tough wicket. But as we can see, every day something happens to take it away from fundamental. What were we discussing yesterday? How many Muslims do we have in Wayanad? Yes. I mean, for heaven's sake, is that the real question of this country? How many chowkidars and who is not a chowkidar? And I'm afraid a large segment of the media, with honorable exceptions like your channel, are complicit in this. So this is one of the most critical elections in the history of this country. And the entire election is being hijacked. So I do not know if that kind of a hijacking succeeds, then what happens? I do not know.
Right, coming back to the manifesto, I did see, I did want to go back to Mohan Guruswamy. Mr. Guruswamy, when we talk about, and we've had several conversations on the channel about GST, about bringing prices of petrol and diesel down to a more reasonable, linked to global, prices. And of course now Mr. Chidambaram in his manifesto has resurrected the famed direct tax code that was talked about for a very long time but completely abandoned by the UPA too after a couple of years. Do you believe that these are all possible? Because again, given that the GST Council involves all states, it's not a promise that a union government can make, because they can't keep that promise. You have to bring all state governments on board. Are these reasonable promises to make?
No. No union government or no state government can afford to do without petroleum taxes. They are hooked to it. They're addicted to them because it's easy money. Very little leakage and collection is very easy. So they can't do it. You can't reduce taxes on booze because that's also easy money. Liquor taxes are easy to collect. They're single source taxes. You collect it. Outside the factory or at the import level or wherever. So it's easy. So you can't do without it. If you look at any state budget, 30% to 40% of their money comes from excise. So they can't do without liquor taxes, without petroleum. So without petroleum, with petroleum, it's about 70%. They hardly connect any other revenue. So, all this is nice talk. But, like Mr. Chidambaram is writing for a national party, a central budget. And, he is not the only player. There are about 25 other players there. They all have to come on board, and they are not going to come on board. So running a state government is bad enough as it is. And without this, it's impossible. They'll ask the central government to give. So, these taxes cannot come down. Whatever the Congress representative says, or whatever Mr. Modi at one time said that, he'll bring it down, he couldn't bring it down. You can't bring it down. That's how things are.
Right.
Like, you can't cut taxes on cigarettes. These are all taxes which are there forever.
Yes. So I think we need to now change gears on the conversation. Brijesh Singh has asked us.
If oil prices go up, who is going to pay the import bill?
Yes. Brijesh Singh has asked us this question. How much will today's manifesto help the Congress in terms of votes in this election? And quite rightly, as Mr. Yadav was pointing out, this is an attempt to change the narrative or change the conversation back from what the Prime Minister introduced into the public narrative and conscious yesterday about religion. We're bringing it back to what the Congress wants to talk about. Have they been successful, Vinay?
I would agree with Yogen completely. One is it's a little, I mean, narrative building has to be done a little more in advance. That's one. Two, I completely agree with him on their ability to amplify their point of view. I think the BJP is way superior in terms of amplification, even on things, as he's rightly said, which probably do not even exist. They're able to create a narrative out of something which doesn't exist itself. Congress is not as strong with that, and that's where my big problem is, because the intent of the manifesto may be right, that they want to, very obviously this manifesto is about farmers, it's about jobs, which should have been the discussion in the first place itself. Yes. But if you want to pitch this election as a one between nationalism or Pakistan versus jobs and agriculture, you need to make a lot more noise about it, and you need to have perhaps started way earlier than what you've done now.
Nalan, do you agree? Do you think that this would have managed to change the conversation, or would this change only last one day?
Well, I don't think, I'm not sure if a manifesto can change the entire narrative of an election, but just judging by the sheer vitriol and the sheer and the reactions of several of the BJP's leaders to the Congress's manifesto, they seem to have hit a bit of a raw nerve. I mean, just the kind of language that's being used and the bombast we are hearing from the BJP today on the manifesto, it seems that the Congress may well be on the right track on this, just judging from that reaction. Now, whether that's going to be enough or not, on whether, like Dr. Yogen Yadav was saying, whether the issues of focusing on the issue of jobs and agriculture and all of the deep underlying issues at the heart of the structural problems in our polity, whether we're going to just talk about Balakot or nationalism narratives away from all of that, that is the big question on which this election will be decided. But I think by focusing, Rahul Gandhi is trying to recover some, in the last 2 or 3 weeks, because of not getting some of the alliances right, Rahul Gandhi had been losing some of the early momentum they had. I think they're recovering some of that in the last week, 10 days, and the manifesto is a step in that direction.
Very well said. A couple of people on the phone. Ram Prakash on the phone line from Bangalore. Ram, go ahead. Good evening.
Good evening, Faye.
Good evening. Go ahead. What would you like to say?
This is to the Congress panelist on your show. This is regarding today's manifesto. I just was listening to your manifesto question program.
Yes, your question.
But my question is, for the past 50, 60 years when the Congress was ruling, the poverty couldn't be removed at all. But all of a sudden, when the poll comes nearby, people say, we will remove the poverty.
Okay.
Okay. But this 72,000 rupees, instead of giving 72,000 rupees to individuals, why not?
Well, to be fair, Mr. Ramprakash, the poverty numbers during independence and what they are now are drastically different. India has developed a great deal for those many years. Anthony on the phone line from Pune. Anthony, go ahead.
Yeah, Faye. Actually, I'm pretty confident about this manifesto. And there are a couple of good pointers to it. At the oversight, let me say it is a good manifesto removed by Congress. And the good thing what Congress has done is they've covered all the areas of progress which is required. So they've not stuck to one point. They've covered all the points if you look at the manifesto.
So an interesting mixed response coming in. I see Professor Kumar has his hand up and he's waited to speak for a while. Professor Kumar, do you believe that this manifesto has enough to change? And at the end of the day, it's about the message trickling down to rural India. Is there enough steam here to trickle that message down to rural India to make a difference to the party in any way?
So, Faye, economic perceptions and political perceptions often differ. Yes. You may have a very good economic agenda, but you have to create a political narrative about it. And that's where BJP has shown that BJP is very clever in creating agendas and, perceptions. It's up to the Congress to convert this. It's a very inclusive program that they have worked out. The details may not be there, but people are only looking at 1 or 2 or 3 critical issues. You know, they don't look at the entire gamut of issues that are covered in a manifesto. So the question is, on 1 or 2 or 3 things, if the Congress is able to create, you know, like the Nyay scheme when it was announced, suddenly created a change in perception, you know. Now, whether there's enough time to take it to the public or not, that's a separate question, whether they have the organization to do it. But, you know, if they activate their youth organizations, if they're women's organizations, etc., which I'm sure they must be doing, then I think certain amount of the message will go through. But how much, you know, and whether that'll change the people's perception in the next 10 days. And let's be clear, BJP will also try and change the narrative once again. You know, BJP is already, you know, attacking this, you know, manifesto in a variety of ways. They will also come up with certain things. So I think it's a game where, you know, Congress has to stay one step ahead if it is to succeed in converting this into a political perception.
Right, we're going to have to leave it here because we've run out of time. In conclusion, as I thank my panelists for their time, obviously there is going to be a series of manifestos that will be released by various political parties. We'll take a close look at all of them. We will question all of them. We have to understand, of course, that manifestos are just poll promises. The job of a journalist will actually also begin once the election is done to make sure that these parties actually keep those promises, as we have done for the last 2 years. Mirror Now will question any government of the day, any government that is in power. Thanks for watching.